is a video of the solutions to the opener for Chapter 11, Geometry Chapter 11, Lesson number 2. So the objective of this opener is to just practice the content that you should have learned and mastered in lesson number 1, which was on circumference and arc length. And so we're just going to run through these types of problems one more time, and hopefully you'll get confirmation that you understand them. You should definitely try this opener on your own and only use this video to check to see if you've got the answers right. So you could just zoom through to the end and not even watch the whole thing if you don't need help, and then just check your answers that way. But if you do need help, then we'll go through each problem step by step. So here, if I'm looking for the circumference, I'll note that I'm given that the radius is 9. It's a good thing to write down your given as an equation. And then the circumference is 2 pi r. And so then it just becomes a substitution problem. R is equal to 9. And so you substitute in 2 pi times 9, or the circumference is 18 pi. That's the exact answer. And then you get the decimal approximation by typing 18 pi. Hopefully you have some form of technology that can do that for you. Make sure you use the pi key and not just 3.14. If you did that, you get 56.52 instead of 56.55, and this is 56.55 is much more accurate and correct than the 56.52. Alright, so finding the length of the arc. I'm not finding the arc all the way around the whole circle, I'm just finding the arc between points A and C. And I know it's the minor arc between those because it only uses 2 letters. If I wanted to do a major arc all the way around, I'd have to have a third letter out here, and then I'd have to say ADC to get the arc around the long side of the circle. So the central angle is 70. That means that the arc measure is 70 degrees. That would have been a good thing to have as a question here. The measure of arc AC equals 70 degrees. That is not the length. The length is how far you walk if you're going from point A to point C in inches. So to get that, I just need to use a portion of the circle. So I'm going to do 70 out of the 360 degrees that would go all the way around times 2 pi r. And the r in this case is 3. So this will become 70 over 360, which you can divide each by 10 and drop that down to 7 over 36 times 6 pi. And then in simplifying that to get to the exact answer, I can think of that as 6 pi over 1, and 7 times 6 times pi over 6 times 6. One of those 6's will cancel out, and so the length of the arc in its exact form is 7 pi over 6. And the decimal approximation for that is 3.67. So that means that this arc is 3.67 inches long. It is 70 degrees out of the 360 degrees in the whole circle, but the length of it is 3.6 inches. All right, so the circumference of the circle is given to us here is 17. So I wrote my given as an equation, and the circumference of the circle is also 2 pi times the radius, and it looks like we're looking to find the radius. So 17 equals 2 pi r. I just substituted in the 17 for the c, and then to get the r by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 2 pi. Big error alert here. Very common error coming up. The exact answer, 17 divided by 2 pi, is fine, but many students mess up the decimal approximation. And you could get a ballpark answer in your head. You know that pi is about 3, and so 17 divided by 6 would be, you know, a rough estimate of your answer. But if you just type in, make sure you understand this, if you just type in 17 divided by 2, 17 divided by 2 pi, you're going to get the wrong answer. The answer is not 26.7. The radius of this circle is not 26.7 when the circumference is 17. So you should definitely pay attention to the size of the numbers. Where we're looking for the radius when this length is 17. It's got to be a lot smaller than 17. The reason that you're having this error happens is because you need to divide by both the 2 and the pi to get your answer, which should be 2.71. A couple other options is you could find the value of 2 pi first and then do 17 divided by that answer to get it. Just make sure that you use the pi key and that you don't lose accuracy, so that your decimal approximation rounded to the nearest hundredth should be 2.71. Not something close to that, but exactly 2.71 for the answer that is the decimal approximation to the nearest hundredth. All right, this is some great algebra practice because the pi kind of ends up acting like a variable. So even though everything in here is a number, it creates a great opportunity to practice some skills that are helpful in algebra and advanced algebra and pre-calculus. So treat that as 7 pi over 1. So that'll be 21 pi over 4. Don't let the fraction scare you. 3 halves times 3 halves is just 9/4. And so this ends up being 21 pi over 4 plus 9 pi over 4. And the exact answer ends up being 30 pi over 4. Should have written just a little bit smaller here to fit this in nicely. 21 pi over 4, 9 pi over 4 gives me 30 pi over 4, but 30 pi over 4 has 2 that can be divided into each of them, so it is 15 pi over 2. And then the decimal approximation of that is 23.56. All right, last question, finding the perimeter of this figure. There's a couple key ideas that this 6 can transfer over to this side of the rectangle, and this 10 can transfer up to this side of the rectangle. And you have to use the fact that you know that the radius of the circle is the same no matter where you are on the circle, so you can know that this piece is 6. Therefore, the whole thing is 16. The whole side is 16. And then to find the perimeter of this shape, I'll need to add up all the straight sides and then also add the length of this arc, which has a 90-degree angle in it. So I'm going to write an expression for my perimeter. Actually, maybe I'll write a plan. I'm going to find the arc plus these 3 lines. And my arc is 90 out of 360, or maybe you would just put a 1/4 because 90 out of 360 is 1/4, pi times 6 squared plus, oh, not pi times 6 squared, sorry, I was just doing area problems. Whew, big error there, sorry. I'm going for circumference, and remember that the circumference formula is 2 pi r, and if I want to find an arc length, then I do a fraction of the circumference, 2 pi times 6. So, and then plus the lengths of these sides, 10 plus 6 plus 16. So this will become p 90 over 360 is 1/4 of 12 pi plus 16 plus 16 is 32, and 1/4 of 12 pi is 3 pi, so the perimeter of this shape is 3 pi plus 32, and the decimal approximation for that is 41.42. Alright, hope that you have mastered those types of problems of circumference, arc length, and using those concepts to solve a more complicated problem, and then also that you're improving your skills on simplifying expressions with pi in them, which is essentially the same thing as simplifying an expression with x in them. If those pi's had been x's, all the work would be exactly the same and your answer would be 15x over 2. But since it's a pi, which represents the number 3.14159, etc., you can get a decimal approximation for the answer. Thanks for watching.